Now it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter today, Stephan Liozu. In addition to his role as Chief Value Officer at Thales Group, he is an adjunct professor and research fellow at Case Western University's Weatherhead School of Management. He's also author of several books, including Dollarizing Differentiation Value, The Pricing Journey, and his latest book, Pricing Strategy Implementation. He's active on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect with them at Stephan Liozu. So with that, Stephan, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here to conduct another webinar with a great value audience. So I'm going to talk today about my favorite topic, which is value transformation. And obviously there is a difference between a value transformation and a pure pricing transformation. And the difference is really what is the main focus of your transformation. You're going to be spending a lot more time on the price setting side, which will be lots of transformation around value creation, value propositions, value-based pricing. So more on the pricing orientation and focusing a lot more on customer value, where you may do a pricing transformation, which will be obviously incorporating some elements of value for sure. But the focus will be a little bit more on price execution, pricing discipline, having some systems in place, to manage all the aspects of pricing. So, it is a key distinction, and depending on the level of maturity of your organization, you may start with a value transformation to get everybody on the same page with these topics of value, and then eventually move to a pricing transformation. So it's always a blend. I would say, I'd like to say today in Thales that we have a more of a 60-70% focus on value and the rest on pricing. Doesn't mean we don't pay attention to pricing, but we definitely do a lot more work across all the functions on the management of customer value. So having said that, the context of this presentation is all about acceleration, because we find that typically in a transformation there is peaks and valley, and you may think that you're going fast for maybe 6 months, and then suddenly you realize that you have a little bit of a slowdown, a little bit of a fatigue effect, some bottlenecks are slowing the projects down. So and all of this is because it's really complex, and the difference again between pricing and value is value you're getting into topics that are a lot more subjective and relative, a lot more multifunctional, because value is everywhere really, and you could see it on this chart right here. When you look at where value resides, it resides in starting with innovation, technology, and R&D, all the way to the final interaction with the customer when you do a negotiation for value. So that functional chain right here is essential, because in a way this is my job description today as the CVO of Thales, is managing value across all the go-to-market functions, including I would go even by adding finance and other functions that customer programs and program management, which typically would not be in these areas. But you have to make sure everyone realizes the value we create, and then you all focus on delivering the value and capturing it. So if you will look at the chain of functions right here, and on top of that you will look at the value creation, value quantification, and value capture, which are the 3 steps of the value management process. And if you read some of my work, I go into details on the differences between creation, quantification, and capture. Until you capture something, you have created it, but in essence, someone else is getting it. So you have to capture your fair share of that value you create for your customers. So you can see the need for discipline, and we talk a lot about pricing discipline in pricing transformation, and we don't talk enough about value discipline, which is really having processes and methods and capabilities and tools, for the management of these three buckets of value, the creation, the quantification, and the capture. And unfortunately, when we do value-based pricing transformation, or I would say value and pricing transformation, some areas do not get touched, and obviously, if you forget, for example, innovation in your go-to-market process, and you don't capture or at least identify value upfront in the front end of innovation, and base your innovation based on value, then you may have an issue, later on differentiation and commoditization. So it requires discipline. So typically, I would say, looking at value transformations, and again, that includes pricing, in the first 12 to 18 months, things are going very well. There's typically a high level of energy, a high level of stimulation to focus on these elements, especially now when the markets are soft, and it's difficult to grow as fast as before, and you want to find every potential pockets of value that you have, including software and services and integrated systems, and add-ons and features that you want to sell as an option. All that stuff counts. So you really have to understand where all the nuggets of value reside. So the first 12 to 18 months, are the where you put all the bricks of your transformation in place. You've identified your project teams. You have the champions and the sponsors on board. You've done lots of training. Obviously, you can't do this type of transformation without focusing a lot on internal capabilities, and even sometimes on training your dealers and distributors and partners on value. So you have to go outside and educate your channels. You may have done pilots on tools and systems, like the one, like the leverage point, for example. You may have pockets of users in the group. Maybe you bought a bucket of licenses, but obviously it's only the beginning of the development of a good user base of value champions. Your process is semi well defined, and you have some of the processes in place, and maybe that will be in one region or one business unit. So the first 18 to 18 months are putting things in place, and you feel the energy. But like every transformation, there is going to be a slowdown. So some of the slowdown will be the fatigue effect, because I typically find in organizations that many transformations are done at once, and lots of people spend a lot of energy supporting multiple transformations, from marketing to finance to engineering, and value is one of them potentially, and pricing is either with value or outside of value, but there is going to be a fatigue. There is going to be bottlenecks, and we like to say that in the early stages of transformations, we work with the eager and the willing people. The divisions that are getting it, the divisions that want to do this, the leaders at the top that understand the importance of value and value capture and value realization. But at some point, you need to address the rest of the organization, and this is where it gets really complicated. So there is an element of, if you look at our pricing capability grid that you've seen before, maybe in the pricing journey book, or in some of the papers we've written with Andreas Hinterhuber, there is going to be a zone of good intention where typically you will see a slowdown. Lots of resistance, fatigue effect, things don't get executed well, and by the way, lots of legitimate reasons from the outside why things get derailed, like a good crisis, like your competitors attacking you, like an accelerated commoditization due to disruption. And as you know, everything in value is dynamic because it's relative to competition, and if competition is moving fast and starting to enter in price war, then everything is going to be adjusted. Your value maps are dynamically adjusted. Your value models are going to be adjusted. and then you got to revisit your pricing power and how much of that value can you get. So there are going to be internal reasons why things can slow down, and external reasons why things are going to be either derailed or very complicated. And we see that every day. In the Thales group, we are 30 divisions, and every division has different market dynamics and internal cultures. So we have to adapt to the speed and the considerations of each division. So, having said that, you've heard me before said that mindset is everything. So in a value transformation, you really have to get the mindset transformed over time, and that mindset is essential in people believing, people wanting to learn new things, people wanting to take risks, and it's not easy. And this is where, in the second stage of the transformation, you're going to have to work on mindset. And we did a webinar with Leverage Point on mindset before. I encourage you to see the video, and we recommended that you address the 6A of the mindset model, and that's important. So that is in parallel of continuing and accelerating your, I would say, what I call the technical deployment of your value transformation. And in the value mindset, you will work on continuing to transform the attitude, the perception of people, the perception of your peers, and the perception of top management about the need to do value transformations and to really go out and make the effort to capture value. And there's a lot of myth, and you guys know that when you work in pricing, lots of people think that we don't control pricing. Pricing is, something that comes from the outside. The market sets a price. We can lose customers. We can lose volume. All that stuff is, keeps becoming headwind against you. So you gotta get people in a positive attitude, in a willingness to grow and learn, in action mode, and that's going to be very important in the acceleration of your value transformation. You got to put people in action mode, which means you need to tell them what to do. You got to continue training nonstop, and I'll talk to you about in the acceleration mode. You can't go and train 5 people at a time or 20 people at a time. You got to go train 200 people at a time. You got to touch 5,000 people per year. So in that acceleration, you got to be bold and continue the training, but train outside of the traditional functions. So you're going to train the bid managers. You're going to train finance. You're going to train purchasing, because everybody plays a role in value, which is a bit different from pricing. Because typically in pricing, you will not train, people in program management or in technical support. You may, but in value, because everybody touches the customer is important, then you will go wider. And at some point, you continue the transformation around multifunctional work. Continue to address the change management and people needing to adapt. And last but not least, the more accountability you create at the organizational level, the more your acceleration is going to be successful. So I'm not going to spend much more time on the mindset model. We have a great webinar on the topic. I would encourage you to see it on the Leverage Point YouTube channel. But I want to talk now about acceleration, because at the end of the day, today, we cannot take 5 to 7 years to do a transformation. We're lucky if we have 3 years, and 3 years including lots of different potential disruption. So I created these 5 buckets right here, and I'm using these big words, and I'll go into what they mean one by one. But I propose that in my experience, and I've done many value transformation, and I've supported a lot of them, you need to work on these 5 in parallel. And the combination of these 5 will help you boosting your value transformation. So what I said before, you have the first 12 to 18 months to create the foundation, put things in place. You've done successful pilots. You've got a lot of value experts. You've got your pilots that have been documented and successfully communicated. Now you are responsible, I would say, to go 10 times faster. How do you do this? That's a key question. And how do you manage all these resistance? So the point number 1 here is generalization. So, and I mentioned some of that before. So really, it is about, now that your credibility is established, it is about bringing I would say, the silent majority and the laggards on board by truly committing to their results. And to, obviously, some of that you don't control. You're going to have to kind of create a top-down, a little bit of a top-down, and hopefully, because you have a lot of positive and successful pilots, it is inevitable that your top management will say, hey, we need to do that across the board. But I think you got to now use your credibility and go in and tell people a little bit more forcefully, I would say, in a nice way, get on board, because now, it's been 2 years. Here are the payback. Here is what's working. You need to do it. So some companies do more of a top-down. The C-suite or the CEO say, now we're generalizing this. Others will leave it to you to convince leaders. But I think you've worked with the eager and willing people. Now you go in, and the next wave is the silent majority, which are the divisions that have not been convinced. We don't see fully the payback, but now you have all the proof. But at that stage, you would expect everybody to speak the same language, and this is where I get into making sure that when you generalize. So let's say you now go into the next wave, the methods and the techniques and the tools get entered into your process. So you have to make sure that maybe some of the things you were doing outside of the process, and in our company in Thales, we have lots of processes and they're well documented. Then we're entering things in the process. So when people look at the process, it's in there. They have to do it. It's not a choice. So you generalize the use of some of these techniques, like customer value propositions, like customer value models, EVEs, like statement of differentiation, like the customer problems, like the hot buttons if you're doing a capture process. Those are in the process, and they are required, for every potential bids, for every long-term contract. So you got to work with the process people and tell them, and obviously, following the proper authorization. It may take a little time to get them approved in the process, but that will help you with the generalization. At the same time, you got to train, and that's what I mean by touching lots of people at once. So, for example, right now in the Thales group, we do sessions with 100 people. We do webinars with 1,000 people, and and we get to the point where people speak about value, and its value is discussed. I actually have people telling me now that at every meeting, people discuss the value, the differentiation, what makes us unique, how are we going to create better savings for our customers. So this is where you see that you've infiltrated the fabrics, the social fabrics of the organization. So some of that is under your control, and it goes into attack mode, I would say, a little bit more forcefully attacking your late majority of divisions and business units, having great ROI and business cases, entering the process, and continue to train, but train in a massive way. The second becoming critical aspect of an acceleration is telling people how to do things, and this is really related to the action mode of the value mindset. And we talk about operationalization, meaning that how do you put the value measurement, the value management process into concrete things, actions, activities, and practices that the teams can do. And in essence, back to the process, you have to have all the forms, all the templates, all the systems embedded in the process with clear instructions on what they need to do. So yes, you may say, well, we're going to look at this, and it will be like tick the box or mark the box type of a process. But at the end of the day, you need people to engage in the value management process, and you need to tell them exactly what to do. So in each of the functions that you have here for the 3 steps, they need to be able to understand what to do. So for example, if you go in value capture, towards the end, and we're discussing the value pool. So when we do hackathons on value, or value hackathon, or we do workshop on value quantification, dollarization, then we tell them we need to calculate the value pool. And I would say I insist myself as a CVO, and my value champions in the group do the same. We tell them the value pool is a number, and it's a difference between positive differentiation value and negative differentiation value in the value model. So make it crystal clear that it's not an opinion, it's not a range, though, it's a number. And the number is not going to be 100% accurate, but it's a number. We're looking for a number. And that number then goes into a specific area of the gate review process. So you make it very crystal clear. There is no issues of interpretation. I don't know what to do. Everything is described for each of the buckets here. If you do an innovation, well, I want to see the customer problem statement. I want to see an initial value proposition and use that template. I want to see a first EVE model at the high level, maybe without a precise, accurate number. And this is the template you use. Here is the toolbox. Go watch these videos, and this is how you're going to get the work done into maybe 3 sessions of 20 minutes each. So there's no room for, I don't know what to do because I never get the instruction. So that aspect of putting things into practice, into action, is essential. And for each of the buckets here, we have templates, things to do, documents to fill, and that goes all the way to in the communication side. How do we project value on LinkedIn? How do we change our value stories on LinkedIn? From pushing products to pushing benefits and pushing customer advantage, or making the customer more successful. And as you can imagine, it requires a lot of collaboration with all these functions. You have to work with leadership of innovation, marketing, communications, pricing, and the sales guys. But this is where, remember, we're in acceleration mode. So you are the conductor of an orchestra, of a value orchestra, and you got to tell them exactly how to do this. So the third is industrializing your value transformation. I put that little logo here, the value factory. So you have to focus on the outcome of your value engine. So you have the engine is the processes, the methodologies, and all these awesome process description that you have, and everything is in place. But now your engine, the value engine, produces outcome. And here we're talking value proposition, value strategies, value models, value bulletins, value communication statement, you name it. Dollarize the value propositions for each of the product lines, training modules, toolboxes. And this is where our role as value managers, as value champions, is essential. We are the R&D of marketing. We are the support of pricing and the capture side. And we're going to be making sure that teams are in production mode. And here we're touching a wider population, and we're touching populations by, yes, you're going to do some training, but in Thales we call that action learning. Action learning is putting people in rooms with real case studies, real bids, real customers that they have to do the work for. And we give them the entire toolkit, and for one day they work on a real project. So we take them out of their operations, and we do boot camps and hackathons in teams of 5, up to 20, 30 teams. So imagine how many people we touch, working on dollarizing all day. And we have templates that they come out of the process with a template filled out, and then we, some of them put that in leverage point, but the results feed into a canvas that we have, a pricing model canvas, where we have one of the buckets is value, customer value, and that feeds that. So you really have to think about the outcome and make sure, because that is in the process, then maybe when you do your marketing plan, you do your key account plan, or you do your bid document, then people know they're going to produce some components, some elements, some outcome, which will feed the main document of marketing plan, bid package, etc., etc. But then you have to be bold. I mean, this is where It requires assertiveness as value managers. It requires boldness, and you got to be, thinking about how to touch other populations, how to get them involved. So that's an aspect of it. The second aspect is, quickly scaling your tools and systems. So now you are moving away from pilot mode, and you are deploying, leverage point in other systems, faster and across the other divisions. And that, that is the good way to get that started is by doing hackathons. I would say put 30 teams in a room, get them to dollarize a product, and then at the end you tell them, here's a license, put that first product into the software, and do another one tomorrow, and do another one the next day, and then you start tracking. So your value dashboard here is essentially the tracking mechanisms that will show who's keeping up, and who's a bit behind. And we've used the value dashboard in many of my value transformation. Every division, every country, every business unit had a value dashboard, and we report that up to the executive committee, saying, okay, we've done a 258 value transformation, value proposition. We've used our value journal with 80% of the sales force. We are in value negotiation using our Q&A with 90% of the customers. So yes, it's a bit qualitative, but the dashboard really helps you, find, the right messages to send to the organization, as far as they need to know. The organization needs to know that we're making progress. They need to know that things are being used, and that encourages the laggards, I would say, the late majority, to get on board and get it to get it, in the industrialized format. So in essence, you're launching waves of activities, outcome production, by doing these hackathon boot camps, workshops, and that is around the world. For me, I'll go in Brazil one day, I'll be in Europe the next day, and I will do hackathons and boot camps around the world, touching 50, 100 people at a time. And at that stage of the transformation, I will not go and do a workshop for 5 people. I would have a relay to do this. So we have in Thales, we have certified 405 champions on value-based pricing. These champions are able to do dollarization sessions, value-based pricing sessions. They have turnkey presentations and workshop set up ready to be used. So I will go in as a CVO and do these for bigger groups, maybe divisions that have not joined on board yet, the first one to start, maybe go to some export market where we need, they want to be convinced and management is not yet on board. So I will go in to bring a lot of credibility to the session. For the rest, for smaller sessions, mini workshops, we will use our value ambassador, our value champions, who are fully trained, certified, and can deploy these. So train the trainer is obviously an important part of industrialization. You can't do that on your own. If you have 3 value managers and you have 60,000 people in your team, it's going to be difficult to do that with 3 people. So you have to go and use your 50 or 100 value champions, relays, to help you proliferate and deliver the messages around the world. So the next point is going to be on up right here. Infiltration. All right. So I like this word because at the end of the day, I mentioned some of that before. You now need to be very smart on how you infiltrate all your processes and templates into all the processes, and that is not just sales, marketing, and pricing. You got to make sure that you work with the IT team to have these value documents inserted in whatever it is that we're doing. If we have a CRM system and we want to insert a value proposition for each account, then we got to make sure we work with IT to insert, or maybe to connect Salesforce with Leverage Point, for example, or any digital seller tool. You need to make sure finance understands that value-based pricing and the 3 C's are part of the price decision process. So they need to be trained, and they need to understand, the many scenarios of pricing situations. If it's a value buyer versus a price buyer, you're facing. If it's a closed envelope bid versus an open bid, or more a bid where we can change the specification. So, you are going to work with HR to look at, how do we use the value dashboard for tracking performance of the sales force, or tracking performance of the marketing communication team. So, this is where we're infiltrating all the relevant processes. And then at the end, we're also infiltrating all the critical management committees, where you need to make sure that in all the reviews of, business reviews, process reviews, management reviews, they review, the dashboard, and they gauge how things are progressing, and they address buckets of non-performance. This is back to the mindset model of the accountability. What do we do if one division is not using the value proposition canvas, or is not dollarizing and using value-based pricing to maybe provide initial guidance in your price positions? So you will be representing, you and other people obviously will be in value council, pricing council, and all the relevant task forces. So really at the end is, as you're accelerating and you get more people on board, and maybe you don't give in as much of a choice to be on board, you're attacking the laggards. And the laggards are difficult to break. They typically want to go last. They watch other people, whether they succeed or not. They don't take a lot of political risks, but you need to find a way to get in. And in the laggards organization, typically there is going to be resistance from top management and middle management. And maybe it is one of these political games where you will look for one product manager or one marketing manager that wants to do some pilot, and you'll infiltrate under the radar, maybe conducting a workshop with them and started to show that it can be done. And traditionally we see resistance from business units or regions that feel high level of competitive intensity, high level of commoditization, and they say, well, value is not for us. We don't have value in our business. We're highly commoditized. So maybe you start by doing an innovation or a service or something different. But there's no doubt you're gonna have to be very strategic in how you infiltrate, all the processes and all the the team reviews that are going on. So it's an important part of this, and frankly, in my role today, I invite myself to lots of meetings. I'm curious and finding out what's going on, because obviously in a big organization like Thales, we don't, I don't know what everything is going on in the world, but I try to ask for help. I use my allies, and they flag things for me, and I want to make sure that I have my word, and I ask them the right questions. So and I'm lucky to have a boss, my chief marketing officer, who's very, very in line with the value message, and they also keep an eye, in all the reviews. So we are there by spirit everywhere, although people were not physically in the room. So last but not least is to accelerate your value transformation, you have to disrupt your own process. So 2 or 3 years in the transformation, things get repetitive. Frankly, some things get boring. Tools are used, but they're not really used. So if you're in a culture where people do things because they have to do it, there's kind of a good soldier, then it is great. But you've got to make sure the outcome and the content of what's being produced is essentially very good, and it's being fed into the decision-making process, and not just a check the box type of, and that's tricky. So so you're very predictable in your programs and your routines. And what I've done in Thales is every year during the budgeting process, I introduce new ways of working, whether it's a new form of hackathon or just introduced lately a bootcamp format with experts in topics that are, for example, this one was on software pricing. But you constantly have to stimulate the type of work that you're doing, so that you keep the level of excitement up with your early innovators, your pioneers, and you re-energize, your network of value champions, your trained ambassadors with new content. And so we have retreats, we have additional videos that we launch to the organization. We make sure that we promote all the case studies when we win a great deal based on value-based pricing. Then we're going to promote that internally. New presence in an area where we weren't expect it to be. So, and then constantly go bring in the outside in when we hear a success story of a company or a software, for example, in the SaaS world, a subscription that has worked very well based on value. I'll bring that in, and constantly. So you bring in constantly lots of excitement, and making sure that you become a little bit less predictable. So it is an art, I would say. It requires also to challenge your own process, and to be mindful about the feedback that you get from the teams and the organizations, and you really take into account the good wins, and also the losses. And I would say we do have fair share of failures. We do have programs that do not work. We learn from that, and we adapt. So these new ideas or the new concept we're launching are usually piloted first with a group of supporters, and we ask them for a feedback, and then we'll change the format if it doesn't work well or if it's not 100%. And typically we have a tendency to want to do too much and to put too much content in this concept. So we find a way to also use digital learning a lot. So in essence, it's staying on your toes and making sure that you listen inside and outside to what's working, what's not working very well. So my view is the combination of these 5 components with lots of energy and I would say vitamins helps you maybe gain 1 or 2 years in your transformation, keeping in mind that value transformation, like pricing transformations, never end, because pricing excellence and value excellence are not a destination. They're a journey. It never stops. You have CEO changes, you have crises out there, you have competitors acquiring other competitors, and you start, you constantly stay on your toe and keep your value network engaged, and you have new forms of bids. You may have must-win bids that appear on the radar where you have to provide lots of support. So it's a never-ending proposition. So what you want to get is quickly get into, I would say, more of a cruise control mode where you train all the new people coming in the organization, you refresh your process regularly, you update your content by bringing a lot of innovation in it. So my top 5 learnings from you today are the following, and you saw that the value dashboard is very important. As you accelerate, you got to track and you got to promote and communicate around clear metrics around value, and that's different than pricing. So a lot of the value dashboard will be qualitative in nature, and you're going to be tracking some of the outcomes that you're creating in your transformation, like the number of value proposition that is created, the number of product lines with a quantified model. All that stuff needs to be in a tracker format, clear metrics, and communicating through maybe a value newsletter or some kind of a report that gets published across all middle management. So that's point number 1. What gets measured gets managed, in essence. So and then you use that obviously to put a little pressure on through peer communication on the leadership and say, hey, you guys are not doing as well. Let me engage with your team again and help you. Maybe we do another couple of hackathons next year in the budget. And one point that's important that I didn't mention is, and that's something that I get a lot of support by my boss, is the fact that a lot of these programs that we're creating are sponsored from the corporate side. So because asking divisions to do their own pilots with innovative programs and asking them to pay for it is going to be a little bit complicated. So We absorb some of the cost of the hackathons, for example, some of the content. We develop the programs in the toolbox. We pay for this, and then we make sure that people have access to it. So that's a key essential aspect of the acceleration. Number two is really focusing on daily action and daily practice. So, you know, your value transformation cannot be theoretical. It has to be really operationalized well, industrialized well. It has to be clear on what people need to do. The templates have to be also well defined, and you know, using the versioning model, we need to evolve with time because you know other people move, other process moves. So right now, for example, we're also doing a sales excellence transformation in Thales. So I keep an eye on what they're doing in CPQ and key account planning. So make sure that my processes are, you know, well ingrained and adapted to their processes. So because everything else moves in the organization. So, you know, and it's essential. Number three is it comes out in every single presentation of transformation. You accumulate and communicate evidence of success. You use them day in, day out. And those are the, I would say, the vitamins that would convince people to give the energy for people to jump on board and to do it. You know, when you can show that, you know, one division has done a value transformation and managed to increase their EBIT or their gross margin tremendously, and you can use these nuggets internally, then it's definitely a good you know, example of success. Number four is about using your value network. So you cannot do that on your own, no doubt. In every transformation that I've conducted or assisted as a coach, you know, we use Train the Trainer. We have value ambassadors. We have value managers full time. We take people away from maybe the pricing team or marketing team and put them in the value team. But you know, you need, if you do a global value transformation, you need to have relays, and these relays adapt the tools to the local regions. They're going to translate into the local language, but they're going to be your relay to be able to make sure that everybody gets touch with training, with workshops, with hackathons, and all these action learning methods that because the level of excitement cannot, you know, it's, you know, if you do training for 3 months and disappear, then the energy level goes down. So it's never ending. You got to touch them through multiple sources of communications, and these relays are essentials for you. Last but not least, value needs to be fun. I know some of you have seen my comics. You know, I use comics, I use videos, I use humor in training. You know, we keep it very playful. We make sure there is a buzz. You know, when we do these hackathons, we do it in a kind of open environment, in type of a factory setting where, you know, we have guest speakers coming in. We give, you know, my favorite, you know, I would say gadget to give is a bullshit button, where, you know, people can press the bullshit button every time they hear an objection that we shouldn't work on value. So you make it engaging and fun, and people are really, they want to support you. Especially when you train your champions, you know, you want to make sure people are excited to work with you, because in essence they do that on a volunteer basis, and you can get them through emotional contagion, right, and an emotional connection to the task. So and that's essential in energizing for acceleration. You're asking them to go faster and do more. You want to be a good coach to them. You want to help them as best you can. So you know, I use a lot of these techniques, including giving a lot of books, you know, for people love books, we love to learn. So so those are my top tips and the key learnings from this presentation. And you know, so in essence, I posit, although I do not have scientific evidence to show you that it, you know, you can gain a couple of years, but I think that based on my anecdotal experience in you know, maybe half a dozen transformation, these really help go faster and touch, you know, a wider population in your company and get them really focusing on value. So I'll stop here my presentation, and thank you for the attention. Connect with me on LinkedIn, and you can continue engaging on questions, and on my personal website, stephanliozu.com, you have all my comics and papers that you can download if you wish to do so. Thank you.
And thank you, Stephan, for sharing your insights. So we've had a few questions come in during the webinar, and there's still plenty of time to enter your question into the right-hand panel on your screen. A reminder, while you're entering, Please complete the 10-second survey when you exit today's webinar. You'll be entered into a raffle for a free copy of Pricing Strategy Implementation. We'll also be sending everyone a copy of our latest white paper, Keys to a Sustainable Value Selling Initiative. So now to give you a couple more minutes to enter your questions, a few quick words on Leverage Point. So what exactly does Leverage Point do? We offer a SaaS solution that aligns product, pricing, marketing, sales enablement, and sales teams around creating, capturing, and communicating value. Now, what does that mean? And how does that work? Well, first, product, marketing, and pricing team members build custom branded value models and messages to create a value proposition that helps sales tell a story. They then publish that value proposition into a cloud-based library that is accessible by every rep in your sales organization to customize in real time for each customer's and prospect's needs. Finally, beginning with the first sales call, your entire sales team has the ability to modify the customer's data in real time in order to create a unique business case to buy that prospect can leverage internally to drive the deal forward. Early in the sales process, value propositions are really useful as flexible case studies and call preparation in building sales confidence, in qualifying opportunities, and in engaging customer executives. In the middle of the sales process, value propositions provide customer value analyses as an important consultative selling tool to address pre-sales challenges. In the purchase stage, the value proposition becomes a shared business case, collaboratively agreed between sales executives and customer sponsors that serves as a buyer's internal financial justification to purchase and the sales team's asset in a price negotiation. Now, who wins through all this? We found that value propositions in Leverage Point can be linked directly to an opportunity in Salesforce and downloaded into a PDF or PowerPoint at any time for a personalized leave behind. On average, our clients see 5 to 15% higher close rates and 5 to 25% higher prices when using Leverage Point value propositions. Now, if you found any of that interesting or you'd like to know more, let us know in the post-webinar survey and we can schedule a custom demo for you and your team. All right. So I see we've got some questions. I'm pulling up the tab now. The most popular question every month is, yes, you will get the slides and recording. Typically, we send that out about 1 to 2 business days after the presentation. We got to polish the video and get that shipped. So you look for that in your inbox in the next couple days. So the first question I'm seeing is, Stephan, this is a good one. Can you please give some best practice examples of B2B companies implementing value pricing? I'm not sure how in detail you can do, but maybe some, white label examples.
Yeah, so that's always a good question because it's if you look at the pure value-based pricing theoretical definition, I would say not many are doing it because it's such a complex field, and most companies will adapt the value-based pricing process to their own structure, dynamics, and business and culture, by the way. But typically, you would look at the software space, and there's obviously a direct correlation between the profit margins and value-based pricing. So you would look at the software companies like the Microsofts and the SAP and with very high profit margins, and value-based pricing is automated, it's dynamic, and they link really the pricing discipline, at the heart of their pricing process is value-based pricing. So typically the companies with a high pricing power that you read about, the Disney, the Starbucks, of the world in B2C, they'll do that. In the B2B world, typically we'll go to some of the chemical companies that have changed their mindset about 5-10 years ago and now are focusing a lot more on value. You can read about their case studies, and if you go to the Pricing Society, you'll see how they do it. Large industrial companies like 3M, for example, is always a reference as far as their very high EBIT and their ability to constantly churn innovation and capture value. And it's never perfect. Again, they're going to do their own secret sauce, and so that is typically a company that's mentioned with high pricing power using value-based pricing. You also have some pharma companies that are B2B, and they are doing extremely well right now and high profit margin because they need that to fuel their R&D budget. So there's a lot of companies out there, and typically we call them the pricing power champions. Um, and I recommend that you search a library of papers and case studies from Leverage Point, and you'll see a lot of good story from Bayer and Schneider and other companies that do this very well. And then the Pricing Society, also join the Pricing Society. Lots of examples there.
Great, thank you. So this next one is this is actually an interesting one. So you're currently in the role of Chief Value Officer, and you've worked with other CVOs as well. How would you define the role to make it successful? When you're in that role, what are your priorities?
Yeah, so my priority is really that across all the functions, we pay attention to customer value. So if we're gonna do technology R&D, we're gonna do a digital transformation, lots of digital MVPs. I want to ask the right questions about: are we solving a customer problem? What are the pains and gains of the customers? What's their willingness to pay? Are we going to get some premium out of this? So then you go into marketing, and I will, my role is to go to the marketing managers and tell them, hey, in your marketing plan, what are you doing around customer segmentation? Do you have your value proposition for all your? So I'm working a lot with other people, managers in the marketing teams, helping them, giving them the tools. But pretty much, I manage a battery of I would say methods, and like value proposition, EVEs, value maps, all these, and I'm going to make sure that everybody is aware of them, trained on them, and using them. And if you take the 6 steps of value-based pricing, I make sure that all the steps are well done by multifunctional teams. And then I manage the 3 steps that I mentioned before: the creation, the quantification, and the capture. So that includes a lot of pricing activities as well. So it's wide. It could be very strategic on one side, and the next day I'm with the team telling, giving them coaching on how to dollarize, how to price. So it's a very diverse, and considering we have 30 divisions, I can tell you I'm never bored, and it's always very interesting.
Great, thank you. So I got a couple questions about the hackathons. So one is about, give us a couple examples of how they've worked and not worked in your experience, and one more general one on, and you've probably touched on this before, how to organize a well-run hackathon. So can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so it's a lot of work, but it's a high impact because right now we've done 14 hackathons in the last 2 years, and you can imagine 20 teams every time. So we're touching a lot of people, and we're touching people that typically would not be touched, like engineering managers, software developers. We come because we're part of the team, especially if we've done data hackathon, like around, dollarizing the value of our IoT and predictive maintenance and all that stuff. So with a wider population, and it kind of to try to give them the value bug, right? So it starts by having objectives and working with the divisions. Promoting the concept, and now they know it, so we don't have to train them on the process. And then we prepare very well. We give them homework to do, so there's a couple prep sessions by phone, especially on designing the context for the model, selecting the customer, and so all the upfront work, like who's your competitor, what's your competitive landscape, do you have your customer segmentation done? So because dollarization, when we do a dollarization hackathon, we're addressing step 4 and 5 of 3, 4, and 5 of the value-based pricing, which is doing assessing your differentiation, quantifying your value drivers, and calculating a value pool. So we ask them to prepare the upfront before, and then we use a template, which is pretty much the Leverage Point screens, but on a PowerPoint, and they do it by hand. We have a huge room, and pretty much the whole day is, I would say, 20% training, 80% working in groups. So we don't call that a training session, we call that a workshop, action learning. And that attracts people because they leave the room and they've done the work and they learn at the same time. So it's not another one, this learning training session where they sit on the lecture hall and all day they watch PowerPoints. So, and when I do a hackathon, for example, I bring I bring leverage point in. They can do a demo of the software in half an hour. I also bring other teams that are using leverage point to show an example of a real value model they've done, an EVE model that they've done. So it's really highly concrete, very little theory on that. And it's working very well now. We've done, I do another one in December. So we have Hackathon we do only for our digital factories. All the MVPs coming out of our digital transformation are dollarized. And so it's been, well embraced in Thales.
Great, thank you. So I think we have time for two more. This is a good one. So could you share some KPIs? I think this is in reference to the dashboard. Could you share some KPIs to show the results of your value generation actions?
Yes, so that's the most tricky one. So KPIs will be around number of people trained in the value process. That's critical. Number of people using the value page or the process. The value template in the process. How many times in bids do we? So we look at the bid review. So some are easier to calculate. Some are not very easy. Some are going to be declarative. So, for example, I have a value log that I propose to some of the teams. Log all the activities you do on value and report that to your manager, and then that trickles up to kind of a number. But it's self-declaring, so you don't really know. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. So, for example, I have an objective this year to have a value-based pricing strategy in each of the divisions of Thales. Next year, we're going to have that for every single product line, and we have about 200 of them each. So, is it done or not? So I get all the PowerPoints and I see it's done. So 100% objective achieved or 90%. So a dashboard is. And then you may link if your main transformation is value with some pricing, you may have the typical value KPIs, like which is your gross margins, your value realization, price realization. You may name them differently, but so I would say the difference between the traditional pricing dashboard is that is going to be half quantitative, half qualitative, and you're going to have to work closely with sales and other functions to see how it's being used. So if you say, for example, key account plan, you add a tab on the key account plan for buying center and value, drivers, then you got to make sure that you count how many times it's being used. So it's a bit of a work to set up, but then it's reporting.
All right, great. Thank you. And I think that's probably all the time we have now. For anyone who added questions during that, we'll be sure to reach out to you after the session with the responses. Before we go, are services important to your business? Are you wrestling with the best ways to combine products? Or maybe you have multiple product and service offerings that you are pricing and selling as solutions. Before you go, a reminder, pre-register for next month's webinar during the exit survey. We're going to be joined by Peyton Marshall, and he'll be talking about the use of customer value in great offer design, pricing, and value propositions. This has been a hot topic among our clients, and we're really looking forward to sharing examples of best practices. And that's it for us today. Thank you all for taking the time to join us, and a special thank you for Stephan for his insights. And from all of us here at Leverage Point, have a wonderful rest of your week. Take care.